Hello guys, it's Katie Potts, the registered dietitian. I'm going to go through the brain training for a better life. I just want to briefly run through some of these slides and pinpoint a few things for anyone that didn't get to make it to the Holder retreat, or maybe you were there but you just didn't get to make it to the seminar. So we're going to go through those, okay? All right, on the objective slide, so what we're going to go through today is talk about positive psychology. It is a branch of psychology that really talks about how our negative and positive thoughts, how they really affect our brain, how they affect our stress levels, and what kind of negative or positive reactions they can cause. So in this branch of psychology, they have identified 7 principles that can promote mental well-being in the workplace. So we're going to kind of go through those 7 principles and give some examples of what those are and how we can make better habits using those principles and some tools that will help us with that. So first of all, I want you to stop and think about what aspects of life really wear you out. When do you feel most mentally drained? You know, is it dealing with your kids? Is it stress there at work? Maybe it's just end of the month stuff at work. You know, whatever it is, think about what that is and kind of keep that in mind as we're going through these slides. Okay, so the next slide talks about stress in America. That just gives you an example of what majority of people tend to stress about. And as you can see, 50% or more stress about too many responsibilities, problems with finances, and or work problems. So we're really going to be focusing on those work problems and having that better mental health in the workplace. All right, so the next slide just gives you that definition of positive psychology. So it is the study of strengths that enable individuals and communities to thrive. It is ultimately founded on the belief that people want to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives, to cultivate what is best within them, and to enhance their experiences of love, work, and play. So ultimately, this branch of psychology believes that ultimately people want a purpose in life. They want to do good. They want to better their lives and the lives of others around them. That they don't believe that people don't really care if they have a purpose or not. All right, that next slide is just the 7 principles of psychology. So we're going to go through each of those. So the first one is creating happiness, and you can see on the next slide that Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory. So this theory talks about negative emotions and positive emotions, and what they find is that with negative emotions, it does cause you to narrow that mind. Think of when something really annoys you or bothers you. That tends to be all you zone in on, focus in on. So like, let's say you're watching a movie and there's one scene where maybe they've edited it wrong or forgotten, they left maybe the character randomly changes clothes during the scene, or they're having their hat forwards and then all of a sudden it's backwards, and you pick out those little things. When you see something wrong, you see a flaw, you see something negative, you zone in and focus on just that one thing, and then you can miss everything else going on around you. And so what this building the broaden and build theory is talking about is how that affects us. So by having those negative emotions and negative reactions at work, it tends to narrow our mind and we don't get the bigger picture. We're just focusing on that one thing. Whereas with positive emotions, we broaden our possibilities. We get the bigger picture. We're able to focus on everything and see all the good and all the positive things. So happiness makes you more thoughtful and creative. They did a study where doctors were given a lollipop when they made the right diagnosis, and when that happened, they started making the diagnoses a lot faster. So again, it's just that positive, reinforcement. All right, so some tools for happier days. This is just giving you a list of ideas of ways to help make your life a little bit happier. Stopping and meditating is a great way just to kind of breathe, relax, and let go of some of that stress. To find something to look forward to every day. So make sure that you've always got something planned, whether it is that drive home, you just get to unwind and listen to music, whatever it is, make sure that we're finding something to enjoy every day and just to relax. Commit conscious acts of kindness, infuse positivity in your surroundings, and then spend money on experiences over material things. Spend money on vacations, spend money on going out, with friends or family. Maybe have a movie night, maybe have a game night. Put that money towards those experiences over those material things. All right, the second principle is shifting your mindset. So our power to maximize potential is based on two things: how much power we think we have and our actual mindset. So to give an example of this, our mind is very, very powerful. We can think something and it actually happen. Think of like the placebo effect, and you kind of see that on here. So in a study, Japanese poison ivy experiment, participants were blindfolded and told that they were being rubbed with poison ivy. They were actually just rubbed with a tree leaf instead, but still broke out in a rash. So it's kind of like that placebo effect. You'll hear of double-blinded studies where they'll have a placebo effect, and they'll have some people actually getting the actual medication that they say they're getting, and then other people, they're maybe just getting like a vitamin C, for example, instead of, whatever medication it is. But then when you ask them, okay, well, did your headaches go away? Or, did you lose weight? Or, did your appetite regulate? Or, whatever it is that they're studying, you'll hear people say, oh, yeah, I did. That medicine really worked. They may not have been actually getting the right medicine, but our mind is a very, very, very powerful tool. And that is what the shifting your mindset principle is that we want to try to stay positive and focus on that positive side, because then that way we have more often positive outcomes. Right, the expectance theory. So again, that expectance theory is of an event that causes the same complex set of neurons to fire as if the event was actually happening. So this was a neat study where cleaning ladies who were told their job was great exercise actually lost weight and they dropped their cholesterol levels. Again, since they were told that this was a great exercise, that this would be good for them, they actually started to believe that. And so then they expected, well, hey, since this is good for me, I'm going to lose weight doing this. I'm going to do that. And so by gearing their mind in that positive direction, positive results came out of it. So job, career, or calling, that next slide kind of gives a description of what those differences are. So a job, you're just working for a paycheck. A career, you're working for advancement and success. Whereas a calling, you're working for fulfillment and meaning. So you want to give yourself meaning. So I do encourage everyone to either stop and do these steps 1 through 4, where you write a task you feel like you're forced to do, and then ask yourself, what is the purpose and what does it accomplish? And continue following those steps through, and until you find purpose and meaning behind that forced task. Because when you find a purpose and meaning for something, it makes it easier to do it. You're more positive about doing it. So I encourage everyone to go through it and do this. All right, the next slide, principle 3, is seizing opportunity. So our brains can get stuck in patterns of viewing the world. People, you can see here, people typically aren't trying to be difficult or grumpy. That's where you get that pessimistic and optimistic view. See the picture on the side where you've got the half full and the other is half empty. So people tend to not be born necessarily having that grumpier view or that more negative view, but as we are trained to criticize and audit and give criticism, things like that, as we're trained to find the flaws, and especially depending on your job, that may be what you're made to do. Me as a registered dietitian, my job is to find the flaws in people's eating habits, and then correct them. So, we want to make sure that we're staying focused enough to seize the opportunity and to really focus on the positive and not just narrow in on those negatives and not be just critical all the time. All right, so your brain is a spam filter. All right, so you can't do everything at once for a reason. As you can see there, 1 of every 100 pieces of information is remembered. So again, it's that filter. we see what we look for. So we are trained a lot of times to look for those negatives, to look for those flaws. We've got to find and pinpoint so we can correct them. But that constant negative thinking is what kind of gets us in that negative habit. So if you look on the next side, it says scanning for the positives. So we want to take a step back and not just focus on finding those negatives. So even if we are supposed to point out or pick out, let's say we're supposed to review someone's work, yes, find where there are the flaws, there are the negatives, and find good constructive criticism to improve those. But then also take a step back and look at what all the positives are. Make sure you compliment that person, or even yourself. Let's say you're critiquing your own work. Don't forget to leave out the positives. List all the good things. This was a neat study that was done where people would write daily. They'd list 3 things that they're grateful for, and it was something different every time. And the people who did this were happier at their 1, 3, and 6-month checkups. So it was a very, very great idea to just remind yourself to be positive and be thankful for things and write those things down. All right, the 4th principle is following up. The brain is constantly creating mental maps, as you see, kind of deciding what direction you want to take. So whenever you have a goal in mind, your brain automatically thinks, okay, I need to do this, 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 and this to get there. Problem is we can oftentimes kind of get boggled down with those, and we're only looking at the bigger picture at the end, and we tend to try to run through all of the steps. And again, we can get overwhelmed and stressed and very negative about this. So we do want to take a step back and think, okay, you know what, I'm going to focus on just this first step. Let's accomplish this, get this done, and then we'll move on to the second step. Still keeping that end goal in mind, but take baby steps. Okay, that way we're not being overwhelmed or stressed out or becoming negative about it. The next slide, it lists a few life events that researchers have found to spur profound positive growth. So just growing yourself in these areas. So for example, one of them is personal strength. So exercise, making sure you're taking care of yourself, you're being healthy, you're exercising, you're growing personal strength, and nutrition wise. Certain areas of our life, by being more positive in those areas and growing in those areas, also help us to grow in other areas. All right, the next slide talks about explanatory styles. So this is that, again, optimistic view versus the pessimistic view. So one thing I always like to point out with this is that you want to think about how pessimists react to things. Everybody, I'm sure everyone knows a pessimist in their life. If you don't know a pessimist in your life, there's a good chance it could be you, so you might want to take a step back and look at that. But you want to make sure that you think of that pessimist, okay? Nobody enjoys being around that pessimist. They are very negative. They're always bringing things down. They're always looking at the bad. We want to make sure we're looking at those optimistic views, and seeing things as local and temporary. So even if you're having a bad day, or let's say that, there was a big meeting you were supposed to have with a potential client and it gets canceled. Look at it as local and temporary. That is not permanent. You can get that meeting rescheduled. If you're having a bad day, tomorrow will be better. You want to stop and think about having that positive outlook and not immediately turning to those bad. All right, the next slide is learning your ABCDs. So adversity, belief, consequence, and disputation. So adversity is just wanting you to identify the event you cannot change. So again, going back to that second slide where I told you to think about something that really mentally drains you. This is where you want to think about that. Think of something you absolutely cannot change. And think about that. The next one is you want to identify your reaction to that event. Okay, so for example, let's look at paying bills, for example. Nobody loves to pay bills, but it's something you can't change. You got to pay your bills. So identify your reaction to that event. Do you have a positive reaction, or do you have a negative reaction and say, oh, I'll just pay it later. I'm going to put this bill over on the side. I don't want to mess with it. Your belief leads you to a positive or negative consequence. Let's say you have that negative reaction, like, oh, I'll just pay it later. I'll put it to the side. I don't want to mess with it right now. I hate paying bills. I don't want to think about it. If you have that kind of reaction, you're probably going to miss payments from time to time and have late fees. So that's a negative consequence. Whereas if you have a positive reaction and say, you know what? Yep, I hate paying bills, but at least that means I have a house or an apartment, or I have running water, or I have electricity. By having those bills, it's a good thing. It means that you have those things. So we want to have those positive reactions. And then tell yourself, belief is not fact, and dispute it. All right, the next slide is number 5, regaining control. Okay. Excuse me. So when we feel overwhelmed, the feeling of control is the first thing to go. So we tend to feel like things are spiraling out of control, and so we lose focus. We lose, we lose that calmness. So if you can see the two little people standing at the bottom, you've got the internal, which is the belief that their actions directly affect certain outcomes, or the external, which belief that daily events are dictated by outside forces. So we want to be more of that internal, where we believe that our actions direct the outcomes. We don't want to think that, we have absolutely no control and events are dictated by outside forces. To some extent they are, yes, but we can still control how we react to things, how we handle our stress, how we cope with issues and things like that. All right, so that kind of emotional hijacking, that next slide. So you've got the person that's the thinker. They're the our rational system. They think first and then they react. So again, realizing that you are in control of your reactions and your thoughts, and your either negative thoughts or positive thoughts of things. Then you've got our emotional system, which tends to be what we think of as a jerk, where they just react first and then think later. So you've got that person that may be negative and they lash out when they get mad about something, or an emotional person that immediately starts crying before they stop and think about what was actually said or done. And so we want to be the thinker. We want to stop first, think, and find the good and the positive, and find the good and positive steps that you can take to correcting whatever the issue is. So we want to not let our emotions hijack us, and make sure we stop and think first. All right, so finding the calm in the chaos. All right, and that's just to identify a simple task, okay? So to identify one simple thing. Again, going back to what I said earlier about, when your brain looks at paths in different directions, and whenever you have a goal in mind, you think of all these different routes that you can take to get there. Again, start with the first one. Take baby steps. Don't just keep looking at just the looming end goal. Take a look at that first baby step. What do you have to do to get there? And then after that, the next step, and then the next step, and the next thing you know, you're at your destination. All right, 6th then is replacing those bad habits. Habits are helpful, but we tend to take the path of least resistance. So whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, people tend to, have those bad habits, and it's just whatever's easiest. For example, one bad habit I had to replace was not drinking enough water on weekends. When I'm at work and I'm at my office or around a desk, I keep my water bottle on me. Weekends come, I like to go out and go mountain biking. I go take my dog for hikes. I'm out, hanging out with friends or shopping or something. I'm out and about. And so I don't always have my water bottle on me. And so I got in a really bad habit of just not taking it with me, because it was just easier not to have to carry it on weekends. So you can easily develop habits based on what's easiest, and they're not always good. So we do want to work on replacing those bad habits. So the next slide gives you an idea for called the 20-second rule. So it is been shown that anything that takes more than 20 seconds is enough to make most of us give up, to stop those bad habits. So for example, up at the top you can see bad habit, maybe too much screen time. A solution, try removing the batteries from the remote and place a book next to the couch instead. A lot of people, studies have shown that whenever they would do something like this, for example, they would reach for that book instead of getting up to go and find remote, batteries for the remote. So find something, whatever your bad habit is, figure out a way to make that habit a little more difficult, that bad habit more difficult to do, so then that way you can replace it with a better alternative. All right, and then the seventh principle is investing in others. When stressed, we all have the tendency to retreat in our own shell, whereas one of the longest running psychological studies, relationships with other people matter more than anything else when it comes to mental well-being. So we do know, and based on these principles and based on that positive psychology branch, they have found that those relationships matter more than anything, more than your work, more than your sports or luxury time or free time, whatever. You really want to make sure that you've got good solid foundations in your relationships, and that helps more than anything. So that biology of relationships, the next slide, and it shows why. When we make positive social connections, we release oxytocin, which is kind of a feel-good, happy hormone. So this gets produced whenever we're around friends, when we're around family, when we're doing stuff fun that we enjoy with people we love. So research has found that by having those good relationships, we release more of this. Okay. All right, so the next slide is talking about how environment is key. So we can't all be friends though. So one of the things we have to realize when we're there at work is that forcing every employee to bond and to be best friends is not going to happen. You do want to make sure that everybody kind of finds their own niche, finds their own friend there at work that they get along with, that they have stuff in common with. So you want to create an environment where that happens naturally. So maybe some team lunches or some outings after work, maybe a work picnic or work softball game or something. Do different outings and different events where people can just meet and greet each other and talk amongst each other themselves instead of forcing them to do it. Then that way, those natural relationships can form, and it's more satisfactory. All right, so again, that next slide is just relisting those 7 principles. And then the next slide is giving you some of those tools that will help. Remember on one of the slides up at the beginning, it said some tools for happiness, and it talked about meditation. So Headspace and another one called Calm. Those are some good apps that you can download, that you can just download, and they walk you through steps of meditation. So these are all different apps on your phone that can help you with meditation or with journaling or things like that. Okay, so in conclusion, we're not all alone in our daily stress. We do want to try to reduce that stress as much as possible. Excess stress will wreak havoc on your health. So you want to make sure that you're finding ways to reduce stress. You'll be happier, you'll be healthier, and you'll just have much more enjoyable life. So our mindset is more powerful than we think and can do more damage than we think. So we want to practice becoming self-aware of our mental tendencies, and make sure that we're really focusing on practicing this positive psychology, and make sure that we're really focusing on finding the good and the positive in things and not just focusing on the negative. All right, if you have any questions, you can contact me through Wellness Corporate Solutions. They can send questions my way and I can get those back to you. If not, I hope you enjoyed this and hope you learned a lot from this. Thanks so much. Bye.